All right, let's talk about the trap bar deadlift. Now, this is a variation of the deadlift that's slightly different than the other ones in the sense that it almost feels more like a squat than a regular deadlift, and it's much easier on your lower back. It's much easier to start in that neutral spine because your hands will be on your side. So it's definitely a safer exercise than a deadlift because you're loading your low back a lot less on this exercise, as well as you're almost standing straight up versus a lot of things happening in the sense that you're driving through your hip or your feet and then driving your hips forward and then pulling your shoulders back that would happen with a conventional deadlift or with a barbell. So the trap bar is a great teaching tool, which is why you'll find it programmed in your beginner level 1 training as well as in your beginner conditioning, because it kind of does mimic that squat and the deadlift. So you almost want to think about this as a great tool to kind of combine both of those movements, which is important when you're learning these hip hinge movements. So let's kind of break this one down and then talk about some of the mistakes and then one to really focus on as a mistake and to avoid because of the risk of injury of that mistake. So we're going to get in position in the sense that our arms are in a straight line. We're bringing our elbows in toward our body, pinching our armpits and engaging our lats. Our foot position is going to be basically exactly where we would be most explosive. So watch the barbell deadlift video if you need more advanced tips on positioning and starting positioning. So if I walked up and I said, this is where I'm most explosive, that's probably where I'm going to start with this deadlift, as well as corkscrewing my legs to engage my hip prior to this. Now, just like the other exercises, the snatch grip, the deficit, or the barbell deadlift, the goal here is to get absolutely as tight as possible. You're starting to hear this over and over. Tightness will equal more strength. Learn to brace, learn to get stable, and you will start lifting much heavier weights and make you overall just much, much stronger, as well as it decreases your risk of injury. So you do want to get tight. We don't want to just start off and jerk the weight up from no tightness. And that's very common with beginners. So when you're starting with your program as a beginner and you're doing the trap bar, make sure you are getting incredibly tight before you initiate that lift. So if this bar is 200 pounds, I might put 190 pounds of tension on the bar, and the bar is not lifting up unless I created 10 more pounds of tension. What that allows for is our body not to move when we go to move the weight. If we're not tight, our hips might shoot up, our back might get out of position, we might round our back. We want to create all that tightness so when we initiate the weight, or we drive our feet through the floor, that bar moves up. But we do want to follow straight lines with the bar. We're not trying to pull it in an arc. We're trying to lift the bar straight up by having our weight behind it and using our leverage. Now, when we do this one, we don't want to drive our hips forward like we would with a barbell. Now, the reason for that is when we drive our hips forward with a barbell, the bar will stop us from over hyperextending. If we do this with a trap bar or a hex bar, we don't have that bar in front of us, and we can actually hyperextend too far. So this is a mistake that I'm saying is extremely dangerous in the sense that we want to avoid that at all costs because we don't want to put our low back in a vulnerable position holding heavy weight, or we can hurt ourselves. So think about almost standing straight up once you get tight with this exercise. Another reason why it's easier to get into neutral spine and why it's safer is because your hands are also starting at your side versus in front of you. So let's kind of break this one down. We're going to get in position in the sense that our hands are right at our side. We're pinching our armpits. We're basically getting into neutral spine. We're creating that same intra-abdominal pressure, pushing that air into our low back. So we'll take our deep breath into our belly, push it into the low back, get as tight as we can, drive our feet through the floor, and lift straight up with this exercise. We're not driving through our hips nearly as much. So you want to get in position. And now I'm lifting straight up. So what I want to avoid would be lifting and then starting to drive the hips. We definitely want to avoid that, which sometimes happens if you're thinking in terms of barbell deadlift mechanics. This one's easy. You just get in position, get as tight as you can, initiate through your feet, meaning that your legs are starting to lift. You drive your feet through the floor. As soon as that bar starts to break the floor, everything you have starts lifting straight up. So we get in position, then I lift straight up with the lift. I'm not trying to pull back. I get tight, drive my feet through the floor, and lift straight up. Technically, this exercise is much, much easier than the deadlift. which is why you're going to find it programmed in the beginner training programs.